Hi everyone, it's Liam here from Rating the Races. So we've got the new handicap marks through, so let's have a look at those over fences that caught my eye. Starting off with Grey Dawning, who went up, what did he go up? £9 to a mark of 153. Two things why that kind of annoys me. One, he got beat for us in a novice chase. I think he would have won at Cheltenham, wouldn't he? He was coming there to win the race and made a mistake 2 out. I know some people believed he wasn't going to win, or that it was always on the cards for that to happen. I mean, he showed at Warwick how good he was. And I think it was a good race that he won. Apple Away, Broadway Boy, and the Changing Man, who we're actually going to talk about a bit later, were all in the race. And you can see that the ratings got it spot on. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a pulled up for Carbon King, who's got to be dropped in class. But yeah, just one that talk about that annoyed me, and that was Grey Dawning winning so comfortably. Yeah, he would have won at Cheltenham for us, wouldn't he? Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Phlegmatic went up £3 to 140. Now, I know Dan Skelton had 6 winners on Saturday. I think he's messing up so many of his horses, though, I really do. Or it might be the owners. They just... Why did they run here in a race worth 18 grand for the winner when there's a similar race that is actually over the same course and distance next month? There was actually worth... It's 150 grand race. Yeah, total prize money of 150,000 next month. It's about 85 to the winner. Why did Phlegmatic win here off a £2 higher mark than when finishing second in that Kempton race, beaten a neck? He's now £5 higher than when finishing second. If you had finished third or fourth here, you might have dropped a couple of pounds and ended up going back to Kempton off the same mark as when finishing a neck second in a race worth 80 grand. They could have finished third in the final, the 3-mile race next month, and actually won just shy of the prize money that they won here for winning the 3-mile handicap. Just don't understand why trainers and owners don't think ahead. You can see I said Phlegmatic down £1. He didn't run badly in Ireland, and the English handicapper dropped him £1 to 139. That's £4 higher than when a close second. I posted this back in May. I then mentioned it again in November, that surely that's where they're going to end up, and they've gone and ruined their chances. With that in mind, though, the fact that Phlegmatic had that, I was really keen on Phlegmatic for that 3-mile race at Kempton. There's 2 things we've got to think about there. One, do they have another horse? Does Dan Skelton have another horse for that race? And that possibly could be Shan Bleu. Obviously, Shan Bleu is a former Caltech Star Novices chase winner. This would just be a handicap, and he did run a reasonable race last time when staying on strongly at the finish over a trip that was too short. Now, we've also got to therefore think about the horse who finished second, Chianti Classico. Finished second, in my opinion, beaten by a horse who was nicely handicapped anyway, had the course form. Kim Bailey had a horse who finished 4th in the 3-mile this race last year, the Coral Trophy Handicap. Great prize money. I wonder if this might be the plan for Chianti Classico off the back of that. He's done... I thought he made a couple of mistakes, and without those, he might well have beaten Phlegmatic. And the fact that Phlegmatic went up 3, Chianti Classico went up 1, he's now got that course experience under his belt. We can see that he'd never been to Kempton before. He has now. He's now proven that he definitely stays 3-mile as well at Kempton. Yeah, that's where I think we'll see him next, and I certainly wouldn't write him off come Kempton on the... What date is that? The 24th of February, so just over a month's time, a month and a week. Yeah. The next horse I want to talk about is Authorised Speed, who dropped £1 to 140, so now we're into those that have dropped in the handicap. Authorised Speed dropped £1 to 140, and to be honest, I don't think he stays any further than 2 mile. They've tried him a couple of times now over further than 2 mile. Now, I know he won at Lingfield, but then when you watch his race at Aintree over 2 mile 4 in a Grade 1, he came there travelling really nicely. You can see he actually reduced by 70% in the run and didn't get home. He was going to win at Ascot. I'm really adamant he was going to win at Ascot over 2 mile when falling. They then had him in another race at Sandown, I think it was. and it got abandoned. So I think this race at Plumpton was kind of, we'll run him here instead then, and it didn't work. I really hope to see him drop back in trip, back to 2 mile, and there is a handicap that he could run in, a novice handicap. First race on the card at Newbury, or it normally gets moved to be the first race on the card at Newbury. The problem is Paul Nicholls has sent the last couple of years McFabulous and Brave Man's Game. Now, I'm not saying they were the horses that would beat him. In actual fact, that's not the right race, is it? That's not the right horse that I'm talking about here. That would be for the Changing Man, who I'm going to talk about a bit later. With Authorised Speed, I just think there's not a lot of options for him, and I'm not totally sure where they will go with Authorised Speed. But he is one that I'm still keen on when they drop him back to 2 mile. The next horse I want to talk about is... I'm just muting that messaging. The next horse I want to talk about is Beauport. I think Connections believe that he stays this 3.5 mile trip. I think he got outstayed at Sandown and he didn't stay at Warwick. Drop him back to 3 mile and I think that he can win a race or two. Now, they could be targeting this 3 mile Aintree in April that I think he was going to win, or he was certainly going to go close when falling. Still bat 3 out, but he was travelling so well in behind, and that could be where they're targeting a return to that. But with the fact that I've just mentioned that I think a lot of trainers and owners just run horses in races that I don't think they have a lot of forward planning, where would I send Beauport? Well, there's this 3 mile handicapper on the 3rd of February. Where is it? It's this one here, the Virgin Bet Masters Handicap Steeplechase over 3 mile at Sandown. Well, Beauport's got some really good form at Sandown. A win and 3 seconds, and one of those seconds actually came in this race. Let's just load this one up. It was in the feature. Probably should have loaded this before. There we go. The feature Virgin Bet Heroes Handicap, beaten by Green Book that day, who actually came out and won it the following year as well. That's a really strong bit of form. It was in a feature grade 3 handicap. I mean, if he runs in this handicap at Sandown on the 3rd of February, I think Beauport will take all of the beating there. The next horse I want to talk about is Major Dundee, who dropped £3 to 132 after disappointing at Warwick on his... It was only his 3rd run over further than the 3.5 mile. But if we actually took that race out and just said something didn't quite go right, he did have the visor on, maybe that didn't work. His form is still very good over these marathon trips. He has finished 3rd in a Scottish National behind Win My Wings and Kitty's Light, and he won last year in the Midlands National beating Tile Tapper. Well, I think that's really strong form, and surely they're the next 2 races for him. So on the basis of being beaten in that classic chase, I don't think he'll be able to get into the Grand National. They're not going to find enough races for him to win and go up high enough to get in the Grand National. So you just do the same plan. You go back to the Midlands National and you go back to the Scottish National. And I think he will run really well in both of those, to be honest. So I'm not giving up on Major Dundee just yet. Off the back of that disappointing run, he has been kindly dropped £3. It does give him a good chance in future races, and maybe he just wants even further than that before he can really get involved, and maybe that visor needs to come off. Moving on to another horse that kind of caught my eye, Captain Matan. He's disappointed again, hasn't he, over this 2.5 mile trip at Kempton. Is he not getting home? You know, he goes forward and he goes all right for almost like 1 mile 6, and then seems to struggle late on. Now, the handicap has dropped him another £4 to 128, and that actually means he's £7 lower than just 2 runs ago, or 3 runs ago, when he finished 4th at Ascot. If we have a look at that race, it was a good race. The winner, Boot Hill, has actually been tipped up by some people for the Champion Chase this year. The runner-up, First Flow, has since finished second, and had previously finished second to Hewick. And the 3rd, Saint Cigar, was probably going to win the subsequent 2 mile handicap at Ascot when falling at the last, was he? I think he fell at the last. Captain Matan finished 4th that day. This is probably his best run, and just over this 2 mile trip, that's all he needs. And maybe they can sneak him into this 2 mile handicap. This one here, the Virgin Bet Everyday Saturday Money App, blah, 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 over 2 mile at Sandown. And just hope that he can get to the front and run his race and get home. Maybe that's what's stopping him. Maybe he's not quite getting home. So that's Captain Matan, dropped £4 to 128, which, on the back of that effort at Ascot, he would have a massive chance in a subsequent race. Moving on to the next horse that caught my eye was the Changing Man, who dropped £4 to 128. Now, we've got to remember, at the beginning of the season, in November, at Exeter, he split Stay Away Faye and Grey Dawning, both probably going to end up in the Grade 1 at the Cheltenham Festival. The Changing Man is currently rated 128 now over fences. When he was fourth, okay, he was well beaten, but he was beaten by a future Grade 1 horse, Grey Dawning, a Grade 1 winner, Apple Away, a future, that horse is going to be running in graded races as well, isn't he, Broadway Boy? Changing Man probably did as well as he could in the circumstances, and dropping £4 to 128 is very eye-catching for me. He does stay 3 miles, that's not an issue. Maybe he wants better going, and I wonder whether they might go to Uttoxeter for this 3 mile handicap here for horses rated 0 to 145. Now, he would be off a low weight, which it might help him considering he is a novice, but also if they do have any plans of getting in something at the Cheltenham Festival, they're going to want to win a race. That's probably where I think his best chance of winning a race is. He does have form at Uttoxeter. He's got a win back here. Let's just have a look and remind us who that was, or who he was beating. He was winning a handicap hurdle, beating Eyes of the Scorpion and Risk and Roll. Nothing impressive about that, really, but at least he's got that course form, pretty much course and distance form at Uttoxeter. So that's where I think we might see the Changing Man on the 10th of February getting in this race to win it, to then try and get in something at the Cheltenham Festival. And the final horse I want to talk about is the Galloping Bear, who's dropped £5 to 140 after finishing 8th in the Veterans. Now, he may just find this trip, may have found that trip on the short side. He might have wanted really soft ground that day. But also, he's been given a chance there by dropping £5. At least he's got round now and he's completed. The last time he ran a good race, I don't know what happened to my voice there. The last time he got round before that, where he completed, he actually ran a really good race, only beaten 2.5 lengths in an Ida chase by, let's just load the race up, Kitty's Light. Kitty's Light went on to win the Scottish National and the Bet365 Gold Cup, and is a big fancy of mine for the Grand National if he gets in. This was Kitty's Light's first win off 132. The horse is now rated 146. I think went up to 147, but dropped £1 after a disappointing run in a Hennessy. The Galloping Bear was just 2 and a bit lengths behind, and if you look at that race, it's probably an easier race than what he'd previously been running in like the Welsh National. Was probably a race a bit better than that, as was maybe even the Midlands National. I think the Ida chase has got to be where we see the Galloping Bear back off the same mark, when bumping into one, clearly bumped into one of the best, most ridiculously handicapped horses last year, and was only beaten 2 and a bit lengths. That's got to be where we see the Galloping Bear next. I say that, I know what'll happen. We'll see the Galloping Bear running in a 2.5 mile novice hurdle somewhere to get his confidence back. Yeah, just sometimes baffles me, their decisions. But yeah, the Ida chase is on the 24th of February this year, 4 mile 1, and I think that's where we'll see the Galloping Bear. So, just a quick recap. Grey Dawning probably ruined his handicap mark. Phlegmatic, similarly, for that 3 mile race at Kempton. Why do trainers not think in advance, or owners? Chianto Classico might be the one to take advantage of that. He only went up £1, still lightly racing and improving. Authorised Speed can definitely win over 2 mile, but needs that 2 mile trip. Beauport doesn't stay to at 3.5 in my opinion. 3 mile at Sandown would be ideal. There's a handicap on the 3rd of February. Major Dundee's got to go for those 2 races he's run well in now, the Midlands National and the Scottish National. Captain Matan, I want to see him drop back to 2 mile and back in trip to 2 mile. Sandown looks good for him on the 3rd of February. The Changing Man, I think there's a handicap he could win at Uttoxeter if they want to try and win that and then head to Cheltenham. And the Galloping Bear surely has to come back for the Ida chase, where he simply bumped into one last year.